the Crafting DM.
Greetings, Earthlings! Welcome back to another edition of
Dollar Store Chop Shop.
Last week I grabbed a few of these Final Faction figures from the dollar store. I was particularly interested in the accessory items. A lot of people have been asking me which dollar store do I get these from. I shop around at different dollar stores. This item is from Dollar Tree. I also picked up this military series set. I thought the oil drums were pretty cool, and I also thought I could make use of this larger missile piece. Okay, let's open up these packages and take a look at what's inside. The first thing I did to prep the oil drums was to attempt to peel off the decals. This proved to be an arduous task. Simply trying to peel them off with my fingernails failed. I soaked the oil drums in a bowl of water overnight. In the morning, I used an old sponge to scrub off most of the glue residue. Next, I used a bit of baby oil and a cotton ball to remove the last bit of the stubborn glue. It was at this point that I noticed the lids of the oil drums opened up. I saved that idea in the back of my mind in case I wanted to somehow incorporate that into another build someday. Okay, let's take a look at the Final Faction figure pack, Sergeant Ruck with additional weapons pack. Like I mentioned, I got this guy at Dollar Tree. And the military set, that came from the 99-cent store. I put the figurine aside for potential use with a future project and focused in on the equipment accessories. At this point, I knew that I planned to use the box-shaped fuel packs to go alongside of the oil drum for these scatter pieces. To prep the fuel packs, I first began by clipping off the pegs used to attach the packs to the figure with a pair of clippers. I wanted to make sure that they sat flush next to the barrels on the scatter base. Next, I filed down the remains until it was nice and smooth. This file is from an Army Painter file set. It has served me very well. Next, I primed all the pieces with Army Painter's matte black spray primer and began to paint them. I am using a bit of thinned out marsh green for the base layer for both the oil drums and the fuel packs. I know that whether to use cheap craft paint or model paint is a pretty hot topic right now. Crafting terrain, I generally opt to use cheap craft paint. It does the job well, it costs pennies, and I usually have pretty good success with that. For this build, I'm doing the base layer with cheap paint. There's no detail here, there's no fine detail, so it's not really necessary to use model paint. Again, I used cheap hobby paint for the base layer, but I went with some model paint for the detailing. To add some detail, I'm using Citadel's contrast paint, Cygor Brown. This paint works really well for its design purpose, to bring out the contrast. I think it does the job well. For shading, I went with Citadel's Athonian Camo shade. This is one of my favorite shading colors. It's really applicable to a lot of different builds, and it fit perfectly, I thought, here with these oil drums and kind of the oily green army look. For the highlights on this build, I went with Citadel's Dry Eldar Flesh. I wanted a sandy color to give it kind of a dusty look. I have mentioned before in previous videos that I'm a huge fan of dry brushing. It's a pretty good way to cover up my amateur paint job underneath. Bases are painted in a way that I've shown in a previous video. I'll go ahead and drop a link here. I thought they turned out pretty well. I glued all the pieces together and to the base using some Aleene's tacky glue. I use this for most of my terrain crafts. It holds really well and it bonds multiple surfaces together. Plastic, wood, glue, stone cast pieces, not a problem. And that's all for today. I'm pretty happy with the way these pieces turned out. I think they blend nicely with some of the other similar terrain I've made in the past. Another Dollar Store Chop Shop victory. Thanks for tuning in. Until next time.